As the singer behind many classic hits, Kenny Rogers was known all over the world. But there was a story that wasn't being told behind the scenes. He got famous, made a lot of money, and had to say goodbye to many people. His wife has finally chosen to speak out. What does she say? The people didn't expect this at all. What was it really like to be with Kenny Rogers? What did he hide from the cams that were always on? Why did his wife wait so long to say something? Stay put, because what she says will forever change how you see the man behind the music. He didn't have silver spoons or bright stage lights when he was a kid. In a family that knew all too well how hard life could be, he was born on August 21, 1938, in Houston, Texas. He was the fourth of 8 children. He had an assistant nurse manager mother named Lucille and a carpenter father named Edward. Money. It was really tight. I really dislike it when you sing the bet. Please do that one more time for me, because when you say thank you, you hear a very nice sound. His dad never made more than $75 a week. Sometimes the only thing they had for dinner was a peanut butter sandwich. But that was just life for young Kenny. When you don't know any better, you don't say anything bad. For Kenny, school was very important. He was the first person in his family to finish high school. After that, he went to the University of Houston. There is something unique, but it's not what it sounds like. Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees wrote, "I Live in the Stream." He also gave me this song. It wasn't written for me by him. It wasn't done by the R&B artist he wrote it for. He showed it to me and said, "I really want to do this." That's why I had a studio in LA at the time. I sang that song for 4 days, but he could already hear music calling to him. He was chasing that dream by the late 1950s, moving from youth rock and roll to jazz and even psychedelic rock before he found the place where he belonged: country music. In 1957, his first single hit, "That Crazy Feeling," made some noise, but he didn't give up when things got slow. Instead, he did studio work, played in jazz clubs, and even joined the New Christy Minstrels before splitting off to start the First Edition in 1967. Things began to change after that. Kenny was on his way to becoming famous with hits like "Ruby," "Don't Take Your Love to Town," and "Just Dropped In to See What Condition My Condition Was In." The latter song was later made famous in The Big Lebowski. But Rogers didn't really find his style until the First Edition broke up in the mid-1970s. He went out on his own, leaned toward country pop, and never looked back. He had more than 60 top 40 hits over the years, including classics like "Lady" and "Islands in the Stream." This shows that sometimes the kid eating peanut butter sandwiches in a tiny room is the one who makes it big. Child can become one of the most famous singers in music history. In 1975, Kenny Rogers had to make a choice. He was going through a rough time after getting divorced, and his band, the First Edition, had just split up. He had such a hard time that he ended up in a commercial for a mail-order guitar school. But another door opens when the first one shuts. In 1976, the big change came when Rogers got a solo deal with United Artists. Rogers started to make his own sound with producer Larry Butler by his side. Not many people knew about him before his second record, Kenny Rogers. His first album, Love Lifted Me, got some attention. The 1977 song "Lucille" was not only a hit, it caused a huge stir. The song came in first. Rogers had what it took to stand on his own. It hit the charts in 12 countries and sold more than 5 million copies. After that, it was hit after hit. Songs like "The Gambler" and "Coward of the County" did more than just become famous. They became part of American culture. Rogers teamed up with country music great Dottie West in the late 1970s. The two of them became one of the most popular groups in the country. It was clear that they got along both on stage and in the studio. "Every Time Two Fools Collide" and "All I Ever Need Is You" were instant hits that will never go out of style. Rogers always said that West helped him connect with people in the country music scene. On the other hand, she thought he brought her a whole new group of fans. They worked together on more than just business. It was a close friendship. Rogers was with West Side just a few hours before she died in 1991. Then they worked together with Lionel Richie on another famous song. The song "Lady," which Richie wrote and produced, went straight to #1 in 1981 and made Rogers an international star for good. The two stayed close. Rogers even sang on Richie's song "My Love." Rogers worked with other big names in the business in the early 1980s. She sang with Kim Carnes on the duo Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer, recorded We've Got Tonight with Sheena Easton, and even starred in the hit movie Six Pack, which featured the song Love Will Turn You Around. Kenny Rogers wasn't just a country star by 1981, he was a huge star in the music business. He bought the old ABC Dunhill building in Los Angeles and turned it into Lion's Share Studios, which was one of the most advanced places to record at the time. It wasn't just a hobby project, it became an important part of music history. The famous charity song We Are the World was recorded there. Take a moment to think about that. Records it in a studio made by a country boy from Houston. It has some of the biggest names in music on it. Rogers knew how to work with the best people. The first record he worked on was with Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees in 1983. It was called Eyes That See in the Dark. The second was Islands in the Stream. It began as an R&B song written for Diana Ross but ended up with Rogers and Dolly Parton. As a result, a huge hit. It went right to the top, won on the Billboard Hot 100. It was the first country song in almost 20 years to do that. It was clear that Rogers and Parton got along, which led to more projects together. An Record for Christmas, a TV show, and hits like Real Love and You Can't Make Old Friends. But sometimes even heroes get it wrong. That song was not the first record released by RCA Records in the UK. Instead, Eyes That See in the Dark was. It didn't even register on the charts. Island in the Stream shot to #1 when they finally gave it a chance. 7 Reasons Why Even Pros Don't Always Get It Right. Rogers kept things moving forward. What About Me? With James Ingram and Kim Carnes, that got him a Grammy nod. Crazy, not the Willie Nelson song but still a hit, was #1 in the country lists. Then came The Heart of the Matter in 1985, which was produced by the great George Martin. Of course, that George Martin from the Beatles. Another #1 record with a bunch of hits. Rogers did more than just make songs though. It had to do with music. He recorded We Are the World with 44 other acts in 1985 to help raise money for food aid in Africa during a famine. He played at Giant Stadium the next year. He was no longer just entertaining, he was having an effect. In the late 1980s they had even more success. For Make No Mistake, She's Mine with Ronnie Milsap, they won a Grammy. Rogers tried new things in the 1990s. He recorded jazz standards, hosted the AAND show The Real West, and even co-owned a theater in Branson, Missouri. He wasn't slowing down, but he was making changes. He stayed on the charts thanks to The Plant, Crazy in Love, and If You Want to Find Love. Rogers surprised everyone with the best song ever in 1999. It was told through the eyes of a child playing baseball. It moved people deeply, was simple, and came from the heart. Fans loved it, and it went up the country charts, showing that Rogers still had the magic touch. He wrote and produced We've Got It All for the last episode of the Home Improvement series that same year. In some ways it made sense. He had built a career that most artists could only dream of by the time the 21st century came around. But at age 61 he was still not done. He shocked everyone by getting back to #1 in 2001 with Buy Me a Rose, his first #1 song in more than 10 years. At that time he was the oldest act to ever top the country charts, which was a record. He kept that title until 2003, when Willie Nelson, who was 70 years old at the time, beat him to the top spot with Horse Beer for Me. But does it really matter who has the record? I mean, stories don't need names, right? They keep making history. Rogers' music was always popular, even when he wasn't putting out new records. His collections of his biggest hits kept selling all over the world. 42 Ultimate Hits, which came out in 2004, took fans all the way back to his early days, to his most popular solo songs. Then another 21 #1s in 2006 showed that Rogers' music was still very popular. After Water and Bridges, which came out on Capitol Records, he had another country hit with I Can't Unlove You. Take a look. Rogers was still playing songs that radio stations couldn't stop playing 50 years after he formed his first band. That's something not many artists can say. Rogers had been making songs for 50 years by 2008. His 50 Years album, which only came out at Cracker Barrel shops, has some of his biggest hits as well as some new songs. Then there was a cultural moment that no one saw coming. The Gambler became the unofficial World Cup song for England's rugby team. Rogers sent them video words of support before their biggest games. A big name in country music leading a rugby team in another country. That's how far his music reached. There were more important events in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Along with Lionel Richie, he went on tour with a Christmas show and re-recorded Lady. In 2013 he was finally admitted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He got back together with Dolly Parton that same year, for the song You Can't Make Old Friends. For both of them it was like coming full circle. They were telling everyone we've been through it all and are still here. Rodgers knew it was time to leave in 2015 though. He told everyone about his final tour called The Gambler's Last Deal. It will have shows in the US, Europe and Australia. He was going to go to sleep quietly afterward. There might be time for one last album, but fate had other ideas. 2018 his health got worse so he had to cancel the rest of his tour plans. No one wanted that ending, but everyone knew what had to happen. In 2017 his last show in Nashville was nothing less than amazing. With friends like Lionel Richie, Reba McEntire and Chris Christopherson nearby, Rodgers did one last show and then Dolly came on. Before leaving the stage she whispered, "I will always love you." She held his hand and sang Islands in the Stream with him one last time. What else will really hurt you if that doesn't? Rodgers' career. Rodgers made 65 albums, sold more than 165 million records and left behind a large body of music that will live on after we die. He may have left the stage, but his songs, we all know when to hold them, fold them and walk away because they're still playing somewhere. He was more than just a country music star. Kenny Rodgers. He lived a full life and loved deeply. Over the course of his 81 years he got married 5 times. Each marriage changed him, like the words to his songs. Some unions didn't last long while others did for over 10 years, but they all changed the man behind the song. He fell in love with Janice Gordon first. When they were in high school they fell in love. By 1958, when Kenny was only 19, they were married. But young love doesn't always last and they broke up after 2 years. Their daughter, the only thing that held them together, was Carol Lynn. Kenny tried again after his heart broke. Along with the end of his first marriage he married Jean Rodgers the following year. Maybe he was looking for something stable. He didn't want to be by himself. But that part of history was over by 1963. No children, no permanent bond, just another lesson learned. Next up was Margot Anderson. A new start, a new love. It looked like it might be the real thing this time. Kenny was married to her for 12 years, making it his longest marriage. They had a boy named Kenny Jr., but love and work don't always go together well, and as Kenny's fame grew the stresses of it tore them apart. They were done by 1976. Besides that, his 4th marriage was to Marianne Gordon. They lived together for almost 20 years. She was an actor. Chris Cody was their son, and it looked like Kenny had finally found him for good for a while. But when he was middle-aged things changed. Later Marianne said that the end of things was a normal midlife breakdown. It was called that in 1993. Stops. And then there was Wanda Miller. She stayed and saw Kenny through his last years. Wanda met her future husband at work as a waitress in an Atlanta restaurant where they fell in love. The first time Kenny ate there he was immediately drawn to her. He gave her his number in case she called, and after some thought she did. There was in fact a 28-year age difference. Wanda's folks didn't believe her, but love doesn't care about numbers and they didn't either. In 1997 they got married and were together for more than 20 years. In 2004 they had twin boys, Justin and Jordan. Wanda was by Kenny's side through all of his ups and downs until he died in 2020. Love isn't always simple. It wasn't easy for Kenny Rodgers and Wanda Miller, the largest, a difference of 28 years in age. That might not seem like a big deal when you're in love, but Wanda's parents had a hard time with it. They didn't believe it and were maybe even a little worried. After all, their daughter was seeing a famous singer who was almost 30 years older than her. What did they do? They talked to Kenny. To cut to the chase, they wanted answers, and Kenny did the right thing by not running away. He made them feel better by telling Wanda and them he would always be honest with them. Over time he did more than just make them feel better. He made them like him. They weren't just okay with the relationship for long, they became very close. After going out for 5 years, Wendy and Kenny got married in 1997 and she was by his side for more than 20 years. At the height of his famous success and during the downtimes that came with time, she was there for him.
Though he died in 2020, Wanda was left with more than memories. She was also left with a love that lasts. After a year, she posted a bunch of sad pictures on Instagram to remember him. This is a touching picture of Kenny and his twin boys when they were toddlers. This is also a picture of him by his casket. As Kenny always said, no one is truly gone as long as they are remembered. She said the same thing in her caption. What about Kenny Rogers? It's hard to forget him. He did more than just make songs. He was born in Houston on August 21, 1938. He made an era. Not all of his songs were hits. Some of them were Lucille, Lady Islands and The Stream with Dolly Parton and The Gambler. The songs told stories, brought back memories and made me feel things. A lot of people bought his music and now it's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. His songs are still played on the radio and in people's hearts all over the world. Grief doesn't happen at set times. It doesn't go away because time goes by. Wanda Rogers lost more than just her husband when she lost Kenny. It made her life feel out of sync. The pain is still there 3 years later in both big and small parts of normal life. Now let us know what you think about this in the comments. He's been married 5 times, did you know that? His wife has married again, which shows that life goes on. Real love, on the other hand, never fades. The video is now over. Don't forget to say goodbye.